The storm came fast across the wide Wyoming plains, the kind that swallowed the sky in minutes and made even the strongest rider feel small. Caleb Morgan had been on the trail since early morning, planning to reach his ranch before nightfall. He had delivered cattle to the rail station and was riding back with only a small pack, his coat pulled tight and his hat pressed down against the growing wind. By noon, the wind had turned sharp and icy. By afternoon, the clouds had darkened to a strange gray that warned him he needed shelter soon. Caleb had lived through enough winters to know a bad storm when he felt it in his bones. His horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding named Rust, snorted nervously as the wind picked up. Snowflakes began to fall, slow at first, then faster, spinning sideways as the wind grabbed them. Caleb guided Rust toward a line of low hills ahead, where he remembered an old trapper's cabin. It was abandoned years ago, but it still had a roof, a door, and 4 walls good enough to keep a man alive until the storm passed. As he rode, he kept scanning the land out of habit. The plains looked empty. Nothing but snow-covered grass and distant rocks. But something bothered him. Maybe it was the way Rust kept flicking his ears as if he sensed movement. Or maybe it was Caleb's own instinct. He slowed the horse and looked around carefully. Just as he was about to brush it off as his imagination, he noticed something near a cluster of rocks. At first, he thought it was a piece of cloth or an animal curled against the stone, trying to stay warm. But when the wind lifted the corner of the cloth, revealing a dark braid of hair, Caleb realized it was a person. He stopped instantly. Snow whipped around him as he slid off Rust and moved forward on foot. His boots sank into the gathering snow as he approached the figure. It was a young woman, curled tightly against the rock to shield herself from the wind. Her clothes were thin for the weather, woven with patterns he recognized from the Lakota people. Her hair was long and dark, partly covered in snow. She lifted her head slightly when she heard his steps, her eyes wary but tired. Caleb crouched near her, not too close. She looked frightened and weak, as if she had been out in the cold far too long. He raised his hands a little, to show he meant no harm. "You're freezing," he said gently, though he knew she might not understand English well. "You can't stay out here. There's a cabin close by." She blinked slowly, as if trying to decide whether he was safe. Caleb could see she was injured. Her ankle looked swollen beneath her moccasin, and there were small cuts on her hands. She tried to stand but stumbled, gripping the rock for support. Caleb moved closer and offered his arm, still keeping his voice calm. "Let me help. Storm's getting worse. You won't make it out here." The woman hesitated for a long moment. Her breath came out in small white clouds. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. Caleb wrapped his coat around her shoulders to keep the wind off her. She was light and clearly exhausted. He helped her onto Rust's back, then mounted behind her to steady her as the horse moved forward through the snow. The wind grew fiercer with every step. He kept his arm around her so she wouldn't fall. Her hands clutched a small leather pouch, holding it tightly as if it were something important, something she couldn't lose. She didn't speak. Caleb wondered how long she had been out there, alone, cold, and injured. By the time they reached the cabin, the storm was nearly blinding. The old building stood exactly where he remembered it, leaning slightly, weathered, and small, but still shelter. Caleb pushed open the door, set her down gently, and led Rust inside the small lean-to area attached to the cabin to shield him from the wind. Once the horse was safe, he closed the main door and shut out the worst of the storm. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood and dust, but it was dry. Caleb quickly lit a small fire in the stone fireplace using dry sticks stored in a corner. He moved slowly and carefully, not wanting to scare the woman. When the fire crackled to life, the golden light filled the room and chased away some of the cold. He turned toward her. She sat near the door, still wrapped in his coat, watching him with alert but tired eyes. Caleb knelt a few feet away so she wouldn't feel crowded. I'm Caleb, he said, tapping his chest lightly to show she could understand. Then, he pointed at her, inviting her to share her name. She hesitated, then spoke softly, Ayanna. Her voice was quiet but steady. Caleb nodded with a small smile. Ayanna, you're safe here. Storm won't last forever. He offered her some jerky and a tin cup of warm water. She accepted them slowly, studying him as if trying to understand his intentions. When he noticed her ankle, he gently motioned for her to show him. She hesitated again, then allowed him to look. Her ankle was swollen, probably from twisting it on rough ground. Instead, he pointed at the swelling and then pointed at the fire, trying to show that warmth would help. She understood and moved closer to the fireplace. He placed his coat around her shoulders again. Even though the cabin wasn't large, he kept a respectful distance, wanting her to feel safe and in control. The wind howled outside, shaking the old door. The storm had fully arrived. As they sat in the dim firelight, Ayanna clutched her leather pouch tightly. Caleb noticed, but didn't ask. Whatever she kept inside meant something to her, and he understood that some things were too personal to explain to a stranger. He respected that. Time passed slowly in the small room. The fire crackled softly. Ayanna's shivering eased as she warmed up. Caleb sat against the opposite wall, arms folded, letting the heat soak into his cold hands. He could see she was watching him carefully, still unsure but less afraid now. He spoke softly, not expecting her to understand every word. Storm might last all night. Maybe tomorrow too. We'll wait it out. When it ends, I'll get you back to wherever you need to go. Ayanna didn't speak, but there was something in her eyes, uncertainty, worry, maybe sadness. Caleb wondered what she had gone through before he found her. She looked like someone who had seen danger. Someone who had been running from something, not just lost in the storm. At one point, she tried to stand again, but her ankle made her wince. Caleb rose to help, but moved slowly so she wouldn't feel pressured. She motioned for him to give her space and tried again, but the pain was too much. Finally, she accepted his hand for just a moment to sit down again. Even that small gesture meant she trusted him a little more. As night settled in, Caleb fed the fire until it glowed warm and steady. He took off his boots and sat near the door so he could block the worst of the cold drafts. He kept his hat low and stayed awake, not wanting to fall asleep, while a frightened, injured young woman shared the cabin with him. Trust needed to be built slowly. After some time, Ayanna spoke quietly, her English broken but clear enough. You find me in snow. Caleb nodded. Yeah, you looked like you needed help. She lowered her gaze. I walk. Long time. He didn't push for details. Instead, he simply said, You're safe now. Outside, the storm roared like an angry beast, but inside the small cabin, the fire gave a faint sense of calm. Ayanna slowly relaxed, though her hand never left the leather pouch. Caleb noticed she touched it with a kind of tenderness, almost like it held a memory or something precious. Hours passed. The storm kept raging, pounding the walls, but the cabin held firm. Caleb stayed alert, listening to every sound, making sure Ayanna felt protected without feeling trapped. She watched him with quiet curiosity, as though trying to understand why a stranger had been kind to her. At one point, she whispered, Storm end tomorrow? Caleb looked at the door, then the window covered with frost. Maybe the day after. But we'll stay warm. Fire will last. She nodded slowly, accepting the situation. Silence settled again. But it wasn't uncomfortable, just the kind of silence that comes when two people from very different worlds sit close to the same fire for the first time. Caleb looked at the flames and then at the woman he had rescued from the snow. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or what she had endured. But something inside him told him she wasn't just lost. She was running from something. Something she didn't want to talk about yet. He didn't know it then, but bringing her into the cabin was only the beginning. The storm outside was fierce, but the one inside her life had been even harder, and what Caleb would learn in the days to come would change more than just his journey. It would change his entire heart. The storm did not stop the next morning. Instead, it grew heavier, as if the sky had decided to release every bit of snow it carried. The wind pressed hard against the wooden walls, making the old cabin creak and moan. Inside, Caleb and Ayanna woke slowly, both listening to the loud noise outside that made it impossible to ignore the storm's strength. Caleb added more wood to the fire while Ayanna sat wrapped in his coat. She still held the small leather pouch in her hands, keeping it close to her chest. Sometimes she would touch it with her fingers, almost like someone touching a memory. Caleb noticed, but did not ask any questions. He knew enough to understand that some stories needed time before they could be told. He handed her a warm tin cup of water. She accepted it with both hands and nodded in thanks. Even though her English was limited, they were beginning to understand each other through simple words and gestures. Caleb prepared a small breakfast from his supplies: bread, dried meat, and a little bit of honey he had packed for long rides. Ayanna ate slowly, as if she had not tasted warm food in days. Caleb could see her strength returning little by little. Her cheeks had more color now, and she sat straighter, though her ankle still hurt whenever she moved it. While they sat near the fire, the silence between them began to feel different. Not uncomfortable, but gentle, like two people who understood they were stuck together by nature's force. The longer the storm lasted, the more time they had to learn about one another, even without many words. Ayanna studied him with soft, observant eyes. She seemed to be trying to understand who he was, not just a cowboy who happened upon her, but the kind of man who would give her his coat, his fire, and even his only blanket, without expecting anything. Caleb, on the other hand, noticed the small details about her, the way she sat quietly but alert, the way she observed every sound outside, as if she feared something more than just the cold. Finally, after hours of silence, she spoke softly. "You live near?" Caleb nodded. "My ranch is about a day's ride from here. North. Past the river." She considered this for a moment. "You live alone?" He nodded again. "Most days. Sometimes my brothers visit. But ranch work, it keeps me busy." Ayanna lowered her gaze as though she understood loneliness well. She shifted her injured ankle carefully, and Caleb noticed the pain on her face. "May I look at it again?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Caleb knelt near her, keeping his movements slow and respectful. He checked the swelling. It was still bad, but not worse. He tied a piece of cloth around her ankle to keep it steady. Ayanna watched him as he worked, surprised by how carefully he touched nothing but the cloth. She had expected fear or roughness, but instead she found patience. When he finished, he sat back. "You need rest. No walking for now." Ayanna nodded. "I try." The storm continued through the afternoon. Snow piled up outside the door, blocking half the light. The fire was their only warmth. Caleb occasionally stepped outside the small doorway to check the weather, but the cold pushed him back inside within seconds. Ayanna watched him as he returned inside each time, shaking off snow. She finally spoke again, her voice quiet, but clear enough. "You find many people like me in storm?" Caleb shook his head lightly. "Never. Not like this." She seemed to think deeply about that answer. Then, after a long pause, she touched her leather pouch again and whispered something in her own language, a word full of sorrow. Caleb didn't understand the words, but he recognized the emotion in her voice. Something inside the pouch was a reminder of someone she cared about. He waited. He didn't want to push her, but he wanted her to know she could talk if she wanted to. Ayanna finally spoke again, choosing her English words slowly. I walk. Long time. Many days. No food. No help. Caleb leaned forward slightly, listening. She continued. My people. We move south. I stay behind to find someone. Her voice tightened. But I lose way. Then, cold. Snow. Everything. Her eyes glistened, and she looked away quickly, hoping he didn't see the emotion she was fighting. Caleb didn't ask who she was searching for. He simply said, You are safe now. The storm will end. When it does, I'll help you find your people. Ayanna studied him again, as if trying to see if he truly meant what he said. She had seen strangers who offered help, but expected something in return. Caleb was different. Everything about him, his voice, his manner, his distance, showed that he simply wanted to help. Comforted by his sincerity, she opened the leather pouch slightly. Caleb didn't lean forward or try to see inside. He waited patiently. She took a deep breath and carefully lifted something out of the pouch. It was a small, carved wooden symbol, shaped like a circle, with 2 feathers. The carving was detailed, handmade, and worn from being held many times. Ayanna held it gently, as if it were fragile. This, my tribe, she explained, symbol of family. Caleb nodded with respect. It's beautiful. Ayanna touched the carving softly. My younger brother make this. He, very brave, very small, but strong. Her voice grew softer. Raiders take him. Caleb's heart sank. He understood now why she was alone, why she was hurt, why she held the pouch so tightly. This wasn't just a journey for survival. It was a journey for someone she loved. I look for him, she continued. I find tracks. But storm come. I lose the way. She swallowed her sadness. I don't know if he's safe. Caleb didn't know what to say at first, but he spoke honestly. We'll find out. We'll try. Ayanna looked at him with surprise and confusion. You help me? Caleb nodded. Of course. She held the carved symbol tightly. You know me. Why help? He met her eyes. Because you needed someone, and no one should go through this alone. Ayanna stared at him for a long time, trying to understand the kind of kindness she wasn't used to. Slowly, a small, grateful expression appeared on her face. It wasn't a smile exactly, but something softer, trust beginning to grow. As the storm continued, they talked more. Ayanna taught him a few Lakota words, simple ones like water, fire, and friend. Caleb tried to repeat them, and his pronunciation made her laugh quietly for the first time. The sound was gentle, almost shy, but it warmed the room more than the fire. Caleb smiled, feeling the moment loosen the heavy tension between them. Guess I'm not very good at new languages, he joked. Ayanna shook her head lightly. You try. That is good. He noticed she was becoming more comfortable around him, though still cautious. She sat closer to the fire and rested her head against the wall, looking tired. Caleb made sure she had enough blankets and checked the fire often. Later in the evening, the storm grew quieter for a moment. Caleb stepped outside to gather more snow to melt for water. When he came back in, Ayanna was looking around the cabin as if searching for something familiar. He set the pot on the fire and sat down again. You okay? He asked. Ayanna nodded slowly, but then she looked down at her pouch and whispered, I miss my brother. He, smile always. He, brave. I want to find him. Caleb felt something heavy in his chest. He didn't know her brother, but he understood the pain of wanting to protect someone you love. He leaned forward a little. We'll look for him when the storm ends. I promise. Ayanna looked at him, studying his face as if searching for any sign of dishonesty. She finally whispered, Thank you. The fire crackled softly between them. Caleb sat back, watching the flames dance. He wondered how far her tribe had gone, what dangers they might have faced, and whether her brother was still alive. Ayana's story made him even more determined to help her. Night settled over the cabin again, and the wind picked up once more. Ayana fell asleep first, her head resting on the folded blanket. Caleb stayed awake, keeping watch over her and the fire. He didn't mind. Something inside him told him that helping her wasn't just an obligation, it felt like something he was meant to do. He looked at the carved symbol resting near her hand and understood why she clung to it. It wasn't just wood. It was hope. And Caleb realized he wanted to help keep that hope alive. As the storm raged outside, the connection between them slowly deepened. They were from two different worlds, two different cultures. Yet somehow, fate brought them together in that small cabin, with nothing but a fire and trust slowly growing between them. Caleb had no idea that the storm was only the first part of the journey. What waited after the storm would test both of them in ways they couldn't imagine. And what he would find along the way would change everything he thought he knew about life, loyalty, and the strength of the human spirit. The storm finally began to weaken on the third morning. The wind was still cold, and snow still drifted across the plains. But the sky had lightened. It was no longer the angry gray of the last 2 days. Instead, it held a soft brightness, like the sun was trying to return. Caleb stepped outside the cabin and breathed in the icy air. Snow rose past his boots, and long stretches of the land were buried. But the storm had passed its worst. Soon, they could travel. Inside, Ayana sat near the fire, awake but quiet. She watched Caleb brush snow off his coat and shake his boots free of ice. Her eyes held a mixture of hope and worry. Traveling meant they were getting closer to finding her people. But it also meant facing the unknown. She knew the raiders were out there somewhere. She knew the plains were dangerous. But she also knew she couldn't stop now. Her brother's safety depended on her courage. Caleb warmed his hands before the fire. "Storm's fading," he said. "We can ride by midday." Ayana nodded slowly. "We go south?" "Yes," he said. "That's where your people headed, right?" She touched the carved symbol again. "Yes. They go toward the winter camp, near the hills, many days away." Caleb thought for a moment. "We can make good time on Rust, but we need to be careful. Raiders may still be near." Ayana looked up at him with steady eyes. "I know." He admired her calmness. Even with fear in her heart, she faced things directly. She didn't hide. She didn't run from responsibility. In that way, she reminded him of strong people he had known growing up, people who survived by sheer spirit. They spent the morning preparing. Caleb checked Rust's saddle and tightened every strap. He gathered food, filled the water container with melted snow, and wrapped extra blankets for the journey. Ayana tried to help, but her ankles slowed her, and Caleb didn't allow her to push herself too hard. She used a stick he had carved for her as a walking support, though she still winced with each step. When they finally mounted the horse, Caleb made sure she was seated safely in front of him, so he could stabilize her. She held the pouch with the carved symbol close to her chest. Rust snorted as Caleb gave him a gentle nudge forward. The plains looked different after a storm. Everything was quiet, almost peaceful. But Caleb knew this type of silence. It was the kind that tricked people into feeling safe when danger could still be near. He kept his hand near his holster not out of fear, but out of habit. Ayana watched the land carefully too. She had grown up reading the ground like a book. Even though the snow covered most tracks, she still observed the shapes of hills, the flow of wind, and the shadows of distant trees. After a long stretch of riding, she tapped Caleb's arm lightly. He followed her gaze and saw faint marks in the snow, broken branches, disturbed shrubs, and a trail that zigzagged toward the south. It wasn't animals. It was people. Caleb slowed Rust. "Raiders?" Ayana nodded slightly. "Maybe. Or my people. Hard to see." "Let's check," he said. guiding Rust carefully closer. The tracks weren't clear, but there were signs 3 horses, maybe 4, moving fast. The snow had softened the prints, but the pattern was unmistakable. Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't want Ayanna to be afraid, but he also wouldn't lie. "These tracks are fresh," he said quietly. "Maybe a day old." Ayanna held the carved symbol tightly. "We follow?" "Yes, but we stay alert." They rode in silence for a while. The sky grew brighter, and the sun finally peeked through thin clouds, spreading a pale golden light across the plains. Caleb felt a strange sense of calm around Ayanna. She didn't talk much, but her presence felt steady, like someone who had endured more than most and learned how to stay strong. By late afternoon, they reached a small ridge overlooking a valley. Caleb stopped Rust at the top, and both he and Ayanna looked down. In the valley below, there were signs of a campsite, ashes from a fire, footprints, and bits of cloth caught on the bushes. No one was there now, but someone had been not long ago. Ayanna pointed at the tracks. "My people sit like this. Circle shape. They make fire here." She closed her eyes, imagining her tribe gathered around the flames. "But they leave fast. Maybe danger come." Caleb nodded. They didn't stay long. They must have been moving quickly. Ayanna slid off the horse carefully, using her walking stick. She knelt near the ashes and touched them lightly. "Still, warm," she whispered. Caleb raised his eyebrows. "They left this morning." Ayanna's eyes brightened with hope. "Close. They close. Go." Caleb felt relieved. This meant they were on the right path. But as he examined the ground farther out, he noticed something else: hoof prints that weren't part of the circle. They came from the north and left toward the west. The pattern was rough and uneven, like horses moving in a hurry. Raiders. He didn't want to worry Ayanna, but she noticed his expression. "What happened?" she asked softly. He pointed to the tracks. "Someone else was here too. Horses. Maybe raiders. They came near your people's camp." Ayanna's breath caught. "They take someone again?" Caleb looked carefully at the ground. "No. There aren't signs of a struggle. Looks like your people left before the raiders arrived." Ayanna let out a shaky breath. "Good. Very good." Caleb guided Russ down the ridge, and they continued riding south. As the sun set, the sky turned shades of pink and orange. The cold air grew sharper again, stinging their faces. Ayanna leaned back slightly to rest against Caleb. She didn't fully realize she had done it. It was instinctive, like her body finally trusting the warmth and safety behind her. Caleb noticed but didn't move. If she needed support, he would give it. They reached a small grove of trees where they could rest for the night. Caleb helped Ayanna down and built a small fire. Rust grazed on dried grass beneath the snow, while Ayanna sat on a blanket, watching the flames. Caleb noticed she looked troubled. "Thinking about your brother?" he asked softly. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "He's small. Only 10 winters. He brave, but he not strong for long journey." Caleb poked the fire gently. "We'll find him. We're close to your tribe now. They might have rescued him." Ayanna looked at him, searching his face again. "Why you help me so much?" Caleb shrugged a little. "Because it's the right thing. Because you didn't deserve to face the storm alone." She lowered her gaze, touched by his sincerity. "Many people see me on land. They not help. They turn away." Caleb's voice grew firm. "Well, they're not me." Ayanna smiled softly. The first real smile he had seen from her. It warmed him more than the fire did. Later that night, as the wind whispered through the trees, they heard something in the distance, a faint rustle, then soft hooves. Caleb tensed and reached for his rifle. Ayanna clutched the pouch. The sound grew louder, then stopped. Caleb crouched behind a tree, listening. Voices. Not raiders. Not English. Lakota. Ayanna's breath caught in her throat. She stood up slowly, despite her ankle. My people, she whispered. It sound like my people. Caleb stayed alert as shadows moved between the trees. Then a young Lakota scout appeared, holding a spear. When he saw Ayanna, his eyes widened in shock. Ayanna? He called in disbelief. Ayanna answered with a soft cry of relief. The scout rushed forward, followed by others. They greeted her with warmth, touching her shoulders and speaking quickly in their language. Ayanna responded with tears in her eyes, explaining everything as fast as she could. Caleb stepped back, letting her reunite with her people without interruption. One of the older men approached him and studied him carefully. He didn't look hostile, just cautious. Caleb nodded, respectfully. Ayanna spoke to her people, gesturing toward Caleb. Her voice was full of gratitude. Caleb didn't understand the words, but he understood the look in her eyes. She told them he had saved her life. The men nodded slowly, their expressions softening. Ayanna limped toward Caleb and stood close to him. They know now, she said gently. They know you helped me. Caleb smiled faintly. I'm glad they're here. But Ayanna wasn't done. Her voice softened, and she held the carved symbol in both hands. My brother. He live. Caleb felt relief flood through him. He's safe? Ayanna's eyes shone. Yes. They save him from raiders. He wait for me. Caleb took a deep breath. The journey had been worth every cold mile. As night deepened and the tribe gathered around Ayanna, Caleb knew this wasn't the end of their story. He didn't know what would happen next, but something inside him felt changed. Helping her had awakened something deep, something he didn't want to ignore. And as Ayanna looked back at him with quiet gratitude, he realized he wasn't ready to say goodbye. Their journey wasn't over. Not yet. The night Ayanna reunited with her people felt warmer than the fire itself. The Lakota tribe had made a temporary camp among the trees, and the glow of their fires pushed away the cold of the plains. Children ran quietly between the tents. Elders sat wrapped in thick blankets, and the warriors kept watch along the edges. Caleb had never been inside a Lakota camp before. He stood near the shadows, close enough to respond if Ayanna needed him, but far enough to give her space with her people. Ayanna was surrounded by love and relief. Her brother, a thin boy with bright eyes, ran toward her as soon as he saw her. He threw his arms around her waist, crying into her shoulder. Ayanna held him tightly, whispering in their language, comforting him in a voice full of warmth. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest as he watched them. Seeing her brother safe made the long, dangerous journey worth everything. One of the older men, High Claw, approached Caleb. He was tall, with sharp eyes that showed years of experience. Caleb stood straight, ready for whatever came. You help Ayanna, the elder said in slow, careful English. Caleb nodded respectfully. She needed someone. I was just there. The elder studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Good man. Caleb didn't expect those words, but they meant more than any honor spoken in English. Later, Ayanna returned to Caleb's side. She looked tired, but there was light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. You stay tonight? She asked softly. Caleb looked around uncertainly. If your people are okay with it, Ayanna smiled. They know you help me. They welcome you. Caleb nodded slowly. He wasn't used to being invited anywhere. He spent most of his life alone on his ranch, speaking mostly to horses and cattle. Being included felt new, almost strange, but also comforting. As the tribe settled for the night, the women prepared warm food and served Ayanna first. She insisted Caleb eat too. They shared a bowl of stew made from dried meat and herbs. Ayanna sat across from him, watching her brother play with other children nearby. Caleb saw how she relaxed now, how her shoulders no longer carried the weight of fear. After the meal, Caleb stood and walked a short distance away from the camp. He needed a moment of quiet, The stars above were bright, shining across the snow-covered land. Rust grazed near some brush, snorting softly. Ayanna followed him after a few minutes. Her walk was still slow from her ankle, but she moved with determination. She stood beside Caleb, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "The storm ended," she said softly, looking up at the sky. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, finally." She turned toward him. He met her eyes. "I wasn't going to leave you out there." Ayanna held her pouch again, running her fingers over the carved symbol. "Many men see trouble. They walk away." She looked at him with quiet honesty. "But you walked toward it, to help." Caleb didn't know what to say. He had never seen himself as someone special. He had simply acted out of instinct. But hearing her say it felt different. It felt meaningful. Ayanna motioned for him to sit with her on the snow-covered ground, near a fallen log. They sat, side by side, watching their breaths mix in the cold air. "You find me in storm," she said. "I think, maybe it is fate." Caleb chuckled lightly. "Maybe. Or maybe Rust just has a good sense." Ayanna smiled, small but real. She looked down at the carved symbol, then held it out toward him. Caleb froze. "No," he said softly. "That's yours." She shook her head. "I give to you. My brother safe. My people safe. This symbol, not only memory now, it become gift for you." Caleb stared at the wooden carving in her hands. It felt too important, too personal to accept. "I can't take something so special," he said. Ayanna moved closer, her voice gentle. "It's special because you help me. You bring me home." She placed the symbol in his open palm and closed his fingers around it. "You carry this. It show you part of our story too." Caleb felt a warmth inside him he couldn't explain. He looked down at the carving, then at her. "Thank you," he said softly. Ayanna nodded. "It belonged to you now." Silence settled between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, gratitude, and something neither of them could quite name yet. When the night grew colder, Ayanna returned to her tent, and Caleb rested near the fire the tribe had offered him. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the stars and thinking of everything that had happened. He had found Ayanna in the storm, then he had walked beside her across miles of snow and danger, and now, he didn't feel like he was just passing through. He felt connected. The next morning, the tribe prepared to move again. Winter camp was still several days away, and they needed to reach it before the next storm. Caleb helped pack supplies and fed Rust. Ayanna stayed close to her brother, making sure he had warm clothes and food. Once everything was ready, the elder Highclaw approached Caleb again. "You come with us?" he asked plainly. Caleb blinked. "Me? I thought I'd head back to my ranch." Ayanna looked at him, listening. The elder nodded slowly. "You're home not far. But you help one of us. We welcome you for journey. You ride with us. Eat with us. If you want." Caleb looked at Ayanna. She stood quietly beside her brother, watching him carefully, like she was waiting for his answer. He felt a tug in his chest. His ranch was waiting. His horses needed tending. But the idea of simply turning around and riding away from Ayanna felt wrong. He hadn't come all this way just to leave her as soon as she found safety. "I'll ride with you," he said finally. Ayanna's expression softened immediately. Her brother smiled shyly at Caleb, as if accepting him as part of their journey. The tribe moved south that morning, spreading out in a wide formation. Caleb rode beside Ayanna, helping her stay balanced when her ankle bothered her. They talked more that day, simple words, shared smiles, quiet moments that felt heavier than words. By evening, the tribe reached a sheltered valley with tall trees and a wide stream. This place would be their temporary home for several weeks. Children played near the water, while the adults set up winter shelters. Caleb helped carry wood, set poles, and set blankets for warmth. Ayanna's grandmother, a gentle elderly woman, offered him warm tea and smiled kindly at him. The longer he stayed, the more Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. Later that evening, Ayanna sat with Caleb near the fire. Her brother sat between them, carving a small piece of wood. The tribe whispered quietly around them, laughing softly, preparing food, telling stories. Caleb felt peace settle into his heart. Ayanna leaned forward slightly. "You stay more days?" she asked. Caleb nodded. "If you want me here." Ayanna looked into the fire. "I want." Caleb's voice grew gentle. "And after the winter camp? What then?" Ayanna hesitated, thinking. She looked at the fire, then at him. "I don't know future. But I know this. Storm bring you to me. Many things scare me before. See, no. 18. Ayanna. But when you stay, I feel safe." Caleb swallowed. "I feel the same." Ayanna's eyes softened with emotion she couldn't fully put into words. As the fire crackled, her brother leaned against Caleb's side, trusting him completely. Ayanna watched the moment quietly, her heart warming at the sight. The storm had brought fear, cold, and danger. But it had also brought something unexpected: two people from different worlds, sharing one path, learning from each other, trusting each other, and shaping each other's futures. Caleb didn't know what their lives would look like in the months ahead. But as he held the carved tribal symbol in his hand once more, he understood one thing clearly. The storm had ended, but it had changed everything. It had given him a connection he didn't know he needed. It had given him Ayanna, and it had given him a place where he no longer felt alone.